we're going to do something a little bit different. So first, we want to get to know you a little bit better, Sigal. And I think within that same context, we can talk more broadly about some of the themes from today, some of the ideas that have kind of come up. And then what we're going to do is we're going to have a little bit of audience interaction as well. So while we're having this conversation, there's actually an app or even a website. I think you can find it up here. You'll be able to answer interactively. Maybe just get ready for now. There's a poll that will come. But for the moment, we're going to have a conversation, and then we'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. So how are you, Sigal?
Great. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. I'm so happy you could make it. I know it's very difficult to get away for the day.
Well, especially in a new job.
And that's actually what I was thinking we should talk about. So you have a new job. Tell us a little bit about your role, introduce yourself, and maybe a couple of things you're working on from a digital perspective within the organization.
So I joined Morgan Stanley about 6 months ago, and I'm a head of transformation.
Have you transformed everything yet?
It's all done. Talking about the culture change, right? Yeah, I think, and talking about revolution versus evolution, you talked about earlier. I know I'm not introducing myself, but I'll get back to that. I think the interesting point about that sometimes it's only when you look back, you really see the revolution. And when you're in it, what you feel most is the evolution. Yeah. Because it seems like the day-to-day steps are hard and painful. And only when you look back, you say, wow, we got a lot done, we really transformed, or we really made a big shift.
Well,
so,
I think even in that same vein, and I know you still need to introduce yourself, but the backwards is true too, right? Because when there is something revolution-oriented, right, it's so apparent, but the evolution might be very slow and incremental. But before we get into this, why don't you introduce yourself?
So go back to the topic. So I started as head of transformation with Morgan Stanley about 6 months ago. And what I'm responsible for is many activities that will help Morgan Stanley become much more modern, progressive, relevant for the future. So how do we move to the cloud in a big way, not just put workloads in the cloud, but really leveraging the power of the cloud in financial services. Almost everybody's working on that. How do we accelerate that? How do we move the business to work in an agile way from the business side, from our models and structures on the business, not just in technology? How do we use artificial intelligence, machine learning to create new products and new offering for our clients, and also how do we embed some of those within the day-to-day operation of the business. Data and analytics, how do we think about our data? Where is our data? Innovation, so my team also runs the innovation. How do we embed a culture of innovation across the board, not just in technology, but across all of Morgan Stanley employees? And how do we think about disruption? So what new companies, new startups, new ideas by even established companies are there out there in the market that we should be aware of? And we work very closely with our technology bankers that have done a great job. They took Zoom public. But how do we integrate some of those banking offerings into what we are doing internally?
So actually, there's a really interesting aspect to this because I don't think you have a traditional title or a traditional kind of organizational
Well, the title
structure.
is traditional. What I'm responsible for is not so
Maybe
much.
not. Fair. Within the organization, what's your kind of...
If you have a better title, let me know.
I'll try.
Anybody.
We'll crowdsource it. What's your organizational kind of accountability structure? Like if I were to think of, like at the end of the year, someone says, Sigal, you did a great job. Is it the CEO comes over and says, you did exactly what I wanted you to do? Or is it more kind of a committee-based approach? Transformation is not an easy thing to like put a finger on and say, you're responsible, because everyone's responsible. So How does that work?
Forgot to mention, I'm also responsible for workforce planning for technology.
That's also a lot to deal with.
Right. So how do I define my success? I think, to me, really, it's when I look back 3 years from now, is are we able to work in a different way and embedded those new ways of working so we're not going back to the old ways of working. So if we embedded it enough in our systems and structures and practices that this is the way we work moving forward. So if it's around DevOps and automation and RPA, or if it's around the business thinking about agile from their perspective, and some of those, and the way we think about workforce and where the work is getting done and how the work is getting done. I would say within a year, we do have some short-term goals and measurements and things that we want to accomplish. And each one of the areas that I'm responsible for has their own goals and objectives for the year. So some of them are around productivity increase, cycle time reduction, percentage of automation, percentage of workloads in the cloud. So those are more tactical things to measure progress as we move along that continuum. But the ultimate thing and the hardest thing to really measure is 3 years from now, would people really embrace a different way of working?
And that's the hardest thing to measure for, right? I mean, you can have KPIs around how automated are we, how much have we produced, how much of this is, actually built in and early or whatever the KPI may be. But how do you get that mentality? What are the tactical steps you're taking? And maybe it is the KPIs and some of the associated incentives. I have no idea. But what are the tactical steps you're taking to help people internalize that idea of automation first, cloud first, whatever that kind of means to an end is? What are the actual practical steps?
So incentives are big, and we are working on evaluating the incentive models that we have and what we can do to entice people. I think it goes back to the culture change. And how do you change a culture of a company that is not born in the cloud? A lot of it has to do with really understanding what drives the organization, what's important for the organization. Before Morgan Stanley, I was with PwC, so I'll give you a PwC example.
Sure.
PwC mainly audit, tax, advisory businesses. To change each one of those businesses, it takes very different skill set, because audit and tax, very conservative. They need to be. They're highly regulated, and they need to be conservative. They're worried mainly around risk. So you have to say, the reason we are changing, and this is how to change, is because of meeting the risk requirements. So they care about risk, so how do you leverage this to your advantage to change the culture? The advisory side, for example, they are selling services. They want to be on the forefront of technology because they want to show their clients they have the smartest people and they can provide the newest technologies to really make clients buy their services. So for them, it's maybe easier to embrace new technologies, but from a change management perspective, how do you convince them that not every team has to build their own solutions, that you can leverage each other's solutions? You can be more competitive?
I think this is part of my concern with taking on such a big undertaking at a large institution like Morgan Stanley that's been around for a very long time, right? The backbone of the organization are, I'll call it bankers and financial advisors and wealth managers and people who have been there probably for 40 years doing this business the way they've been doing it. And if they're the drivers of revenue and the drivers, that are the business outcomes, it seems like it would be difficult to kind of connect the change associated with that culture. So,
okay, so you want me to rethink my job and
not at all.
look
Please,
for something else?
by all means. We've got a job for you here whenever you want it. Trust me. I wonder
but you're right,
right?
Because that's the same. People who have been doing the same thing. Like at PwC, would say the auditor who has been doing audit the same way. Why would they change? And I would say in wealth management, for example, the challenge is the transfer of wealth, generational transfer of wealth.
Sure.
So there are some really business imperative that will impact a business that was mainly based on relationship, and now it's changing. So the baby boomers are trying to think about how they're going to transfer to the younger generation that is much more digitally adapt, that is not thinking about the relationship because they don't have the relationship with their parents' advisor. So how do you capture that? How do you make sure that they don't leave you? And the business constraints and the fastest changes of the industry is forcing you to rethink about technology and rethink about your offerings and what can you do and how do you even compete in the market.
I think similar, maybe line of thought. Agile. You've mentioned, very explicitly, it's not just a technology or a development methodology. It's really a business thought pattern. And when you have some of these folks who have been around for a long time, that maybe are not as technologically savvy, how do you help them understand the purpose of Agile and help them move along from a culture and transformation perspective?
I think mainly about showing results, right? So if you can show increased productivity, reduction in cycle time, the ability to create capacity to do more work, you win them. An example that we have with Agile is in quite a few areas across the business, in our equity business, in our fixed income business, and also in wealth management and investment management, we decided to tackle some of the hardest problems with Agile. And the problems were around, one example is in one of our line of business, there were a lot of manual work, manual steps. There were transactions that took months to get processed. We dropped customers because of that didn't renew activities. And we had all of that baseline matrices to show where we are today. And there was a project that was, of course, every company has those runaway projects that took forever and didn't deliver on what was originally thought to be delivered or projected. And then, Agile was really important to get the cross-functional business users at the table from the beginning all the way through the end of the
get alignment and
5 sprints that it took to get alignment, to reprioritize the backlog, to be part of as a product owner, all those things. And a project that before was, multiple months and didn't go anywhere, within 2 months had huge improvements. So now everybody wants to know, how did it happen? Is that just a fluke? And of course, they're very skeptical. Or yes, we had everybody's attention, and this was something that was managed as a microscope. And if it was just business as usual, we wouldn't have seen those results and all those stipulations. But still, we got a 90% improvement of all of our matrices.
It's hard to argue with results.
It's harder to argue. Yeah. So discount that and say, okay, maybe there's a lot of special things in this case. Sure. Take 10% improvement.
Sure.
It's better than anything, than nothing, right? Yeah. So we're trying to use those successes to get people in the business to get excited about it. And I think, as you think about our business being mature as it is, and we mainly have institutional investing, we have wealth management, we have investment management, we have to really look at a different way of doing business in order to continue to be a successful organization.
No, it makes
and the
sense.
Leadership team does understand that.
I think that's important.
And the other important point is, I think Morgan Stanley right now and a lot of the other banks, after the financial crisis, they are now, over the last 3 years, they're at the point where they can look forward, where they can look at how technology is changing their business.
What did Steve Ferdaka say? I'd hate to waste a perfectly good crisis, something along those lines. I think he was happy that Sony, but in a joking fashion. But it's a great way to facilitate and help people get a little bit afraid, right? We've been talking about all the things that are happening in the industry right now, and the fact that basically, I think that the statistic is 90% or so of the companies that were in the S&P index back in 1955 are no longer on it.
Yep.
So that's an eye-opening example. You certainly have a tremendous undertaking to drive transformation, but if anyone can get it done, I know it's you.
Thank you for the vote of confidence.
We certainly look forward to hear more on that. I want to switch gears for just a moment. And I think to a certain extent, maybe this is even partially an uncomfortable conversation, frankly, because the CIO of Rent the Runway was up here, Josh Builder, and he mentioned, there's not that many people out here who know what the brand is, mostly because there's not that many women in the audience. And I think when I look at IT and I look at CIO leadership and I look at, first of all, your career has been wonderful and illustrious. I think there should be more of a focus on diversity, inclusion, really a drive towards kind of this revolution of bringing some level of equity to the playing field. I'm curious if you can share a little bit maybe from your personal experience, your career, the things that have been important for you, and as you've kind of made your way into this wonderful and transformational role, what are the aspects or what do we need to do as kind of a community to help really drive more of that?
I'm glad you're mentioning we need to do as a community, because I look around, right, and the majority of the people in the room are men, and in CIO positions, so in decision-making positions. And what I would say, this is not just what women need to do for women, and this is really about what we all need to do as a community, and how do we make diversity an agenda item that is important not just for gender, but also for ethnicity, diversity of opinion, background, and so on. I think the important thing is to recognize that we do have unconscious biases. We all do, about many things, not just about diversity, right? We all have unconscious biases that are coming from the way we were brought up and where we grew up and kind of what our parents told us, or our teachers, or our mentors, or whatever. And the first thing I think is to recognize that it's there, and then stop and think about how can each one of us contribute to changing that. I think there are a lot of efforts in the industry around bringing girls into STEM, promoting them, giving them the confidence, getting them through the harder years around middle school, high school, college, not to drop off. We do see a 50-50 entry rate when we hire into our analyst program, which has been around for a very long time, and we've made an effort to hire into the analyst program. And Morgan Stanley is known for its great engineering skill sets and engineers, and hiring into our analyst program, we hire mainly engineers and really highly technical people, so not the more general technology, business analyst, project manager. We really hire technical expertise, and I think there are biases around women in technology are mainly in more of the soft skill type of roles, like business analyst or project manager or more administrative type roles, or in testing and QA, for example, but not necessarily in core developer engineering. And we are proving that we do hire core development engineering into our TAP program, which is our technology analyst program. Very successful. But then we need to keep them.
Yeah.
And we need to make sure that we retain them as they go through the life cycle of changing life cycles. And we need to retain all of our employees, not just our women, but we definitely see higher attrition rate on women. And we have multiple programs. We have a return to work program, not just in technology, but across the board, where we train people who took some time off and bring them back into the workforce. Lots of technology, great skill set there. We have programs around flexibility, work flexibility, and work from home programs. So we do have those programs as well. But I don't think there should be an excuse to not hiring the right talent.
Yeah.
And what we do now, which I think is important because you can all do that as well, when we talk about promotions, we ask how diverse is this person's team, and should we promote him if he does not have a diverse team? And we are driving diverse slates for all of the roles, and we are trying to take risk on diverse talent. And I think that's another thing everybody can do. Really take a risk on diverse talent, because all the stats shows that when you take a risk on a diverse talent, they're more loyal and they're more motivated to succeed.
Absolutely.
Just one other interesting point. I read from, we are a sponsor of Girls Who Code, and we were the founding partners for them as they expanded internationally. So in the UK and Canada, we have been right next to them. One of the stats that they have shared with us is that when you ask people in Canada, when you think about a technologist, what image do you have in mind? 83% said an image of a man, not a female. So going back to the unconscious biases and how we really need to be proactively thinking about how do we change that image.
It's a hard problem to solve. I know we've made some progress, and ultimately organizations like Girls Who Code really are able to help change that future, and really appreciate your insight on it. I think what we'll do is really quick lightning round. So this is now the interactive portion, and within that, this is the last thing standing between you and a cocktail, so let's go quickly. However, we've just got maybe 3, 4, 5 questions or so, really quick, that we'll just kind of shout out. You've got how to join, so you can just do a text CIO to 22333, CIO 19, sorry, or at pollev.com, you can go to CIO 19. So if you're ready, we're going to start. And by the way this will work, if the audience guesses right on the question and guesses actually the same as what Sigal has an answer of, then we'll donate some money to Girls Who Code for every question it gets right. We're going to make the donation anyway. Don't worry. It's fine. All right, first one. Elon Musk, genius or crazy?
Genius. You gotta be a genius. You gotta be crazy to be a genius, I think.
It's maybe not mutually exclusive. I think that's true.
Not mutually exclusive.
Second question. All right, CIO reporting structure. Should it be the CFO, the CEO? The CEO. Why?
Because technology is driving the business these days.
I think this is also a biased sample size of audience members, just to be clear. I could be wrong. Remote workforce, teleworking, good or bad?
I think it depends on the job function. So I would say overall, good.
Overall, good. Everyone seems to have agreed. AWS or Azure, who do you think will win in the long run?
Tie.
Guarantee that question didn't get answered.
Oh, that's the wrong question.
Oh, we skipped AWS.
I actually agree with this one. The audience.
Right. Yeah, you agree with that?
I agree.
Really? Why?
Just more intuitive, easier.
I know. I know. Oh, there it is. Sorry, I don't know what happened. I guess we skipped one.
Interesting.
And, oh, it is almost exactly a tie. Oh, no. Now it's changing.
I find out Azure is catching up really fast with automation tools and their offering. They're catching up. AWS definitely has a head start, but each one of them has pros and cons.
We didn't even include Google in this, but I think that was kind of the point is, there's always going to be those platforms, and maybe there's someone else entirely, but always just interesting.
I think it's good to have a multi-cloud strategy. You don't have to run everything in both places, but just to give you some leverage.
I agree. So iPhone or Android, you agree with iPhone, and you just think it's a better device overall, or you think it's better for work specifically?
Both.
Okay. Blockchain, enterprise viable solution or just a fun startup hobby?
Absolutely viable solution. We see a lot of investment in that and really big use cases. That it's evolving, but use cases, even regulators are setting up blockchain labs right now to test it and understand how to regulate it. So absolutely.
So 20 years from now, it will all be cryptocurrency or paper money will still exist?
Still exists.
Paper money will still exist 20 years from now.
I think it's the same question 20 years ago about the credit card.
Fair enough. I think it'll still exist too. I got to agree on that. Privacy, consumers.
I wouldn't say cash is king, but
yeah, I think the privacy. Consumers will have more or less privacy control of their data than they do today.
I think for the next 5 years more. I'm not sure about after that. I think once you get over the scare, the fear factor, maybe that will change over time.
I think total disaster is probably more accurate. 20 years from now, all of the majority of cars will be self-driving. True or false?
True.
Updating
20
live
years.
real time.
Remember, 20 years.
20 years, people. Come on. And then
Interesting.
one other question. We will finally have an appropriate balance of women leadership in IT 20 years from now.
You gotta believe, yes, you gotta believe. Otherwise, we are not gonna get there. So if you don't put a lofty goal out there to drive towards, you're not gonna make the small steps to get there. So you gotta believe.
Well, perfect. I think the last question, and I'll ask you, not the audience, evolution or revolution? What do you think is the most important thing right now, today, for an organization to embrace?
Again, I think you have to have the same answer, right? You have to have those revolutionary vision in order to make the evolution towards it. If you put really small goals, you're not going to make the jump that you need to. So I'm a big believer in putting out there something that you think you're never going to get, and then drive towards that.
You certainly have plenty of not small goals ahead of you.
Yes,
so,
exactly.
Sigal,
I'm ambitious.
It's been a pleasure. It's an honor. Thank you so much for joining us. I want to, first of all, let's give Sigal a round of applause.
Thank you.